Okie doke, marriage and mental illness. I'm Mark. This is my beautiful wife, Merey.
Hello.
We're going to have a chat today about an aspect of my mental illness. I was diagnosed with PTSD, CPTSD, with extreme anxiety and depression 15 years ago now.
Yeah.
We've been living with it since then. We've been married for 25 years, 26 this year. I don't know, we'll
Somewhere around
lose
there.
count. And today you wanted to talk about how I perceive things.
Yeah, so what I wanted to delve in today was how a person who is either caring or on the outside of the situation sees the person with the mental health issue. I often find that the person who's suffering doesn't actually realize or recognize their behaviors, or the fact that, as we've talked about at other times, um, how they can not talk, they can say nothing, but not even realize that they're not engaging with people. So we wanted to sort of go into all about the perceptions.
Okay. All right. So when I'm in a bad mental health space, what do I present as? What do you see?
You come across as disinterested,
Yeah.
quiet, and at times annoyed if people need to come into your space and talk to you.
Yep.
Not all the time, let's be fair, not all the time. Um, but sometimes you can
Come across as
come
mad.
across that way.
Yeah.
You may not feel that way, but that's just how it can look to
Yeah.
others.
And I guess it's important to note that I do have resting grumpy face,
Yes, you do. Yes, you do.
which is something I didn't realize until quite recently. So that's been an interesting journey. So,
A journey of self-discovery.
so mate, in my worst times, I know that I appeared disinterested. Am I disinterested as far as you're concerned? Is it like I've just given up and I don't care?
Remembering that this is coming from a place of many years experience in helping and
Yeah.
dealing with your mental health, I know that you're not so much disinterested or caring. I think if you're going through a bit of a mental health crisis, or if you're just not feeling good with your mentors,
Mm-hmm.
um, I actually just think you're so caught up in your own mind and managing that, perhaps putting in a billion different strategies, that's how it can come across that you're disinterested and distant.
Does it doesn't really help that I'm an extrovert as well, like naturally. Before I was hurt, um, you would call me an extrovert, somebody that comes in and dominates a room. Now, I'm not really aware of that per se. Like, I don't walk
Hmm.
into a room and go, I'm the center of attention.
You still dominate a room, but not because you say, I'm the center of attention. You just naturally do.
Okay, so with the change in my demeanor to becoming quiet to not being so, I guess, gregarious, has that translated into times where I haven't been doing well and it's kind of exacerbated it? Or like when you look at the comparison, you look at a black and white picture, you look at a color
Yeah,
picture, you
no,
see
I know
two
what you
different
mean. I know
things.
what you mean. Um, I think to other people, perhaps they would think it's quite subtle,
Yeah.
but I think to people who you're living with day in, day out, it can really, really look like a vast difference when you're in one stage, or where you're able to communicate with me, for example. You can talk about day to day things, even things about our kids.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you're going through phases where you're not in such a great space, you really can't deal with anything outside of what's going on. So I probably wouldn't be able to talk to you about issues with the kids, or
because I don't want to hear, or the fact that I just don't have capacity?
I don't think you have capacity to.
No.
Now, you tell me, I could be wrong,
Hmm.
but when I look at you, it tells me that you have no capacity to take on any more information. So I back out.
Well, this has been an interesting thing with us because we've gone through very, very distinct stages in our marriage, and I know at times I've pushed back against your care. So you might be protective of me in certain situations, not giving me the full story on
Yes,
perhaps things that are going on
true,
around.
true.
Um, and I know at times I've fought against that. I've said, no, you've got to start trusting me. Trust that even though I might not seem like I've got capability or capacity, um, the idea that I do have capacity is one that's, I guess it's hard for you to let go of controls that you've built in place that are safety mechanisms for you and for me. It can be hard to let go of those.
Well, absolutely. Um, it's a hard thing to try and break down. But even now, at what we would consider your best, I think,
Yep.
absolute best,
Like today or just
just
now?
generally
Okay.
now,
Yep.
within your mental health journey where you are right now,
Yep.
I would still think about how I would approach a particular topic with you if I knew it would be difficult to hear.
Okay.
I would pick my moment.
Sure. Okay. So, all right. I don't want to ask for examples because people are listening, and I,
No, just
I want to
generally,
share, but I don't want to share that much.
just generally, if there was a huge issue going on with one of our kids, but not something that you needed to come in and have some immediate action into,
Yeah.
I would probably, and you weren't in a good space, I wouldn't talk to you about that. I would wait.
Sure.
I would pick my moment.
Yeah.
Or let's just say you're at the end of the day and you're quite tired, which actually caters to pretty much everybody at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't raise things at that time. I would wait
Yeah.
until you're in a fresh frame of mind.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we now know that I've only got about 5 really good hours in me in a day where I can be focused, attentive, and it vacillates. Sometimes it's shorter, sometimes it's longer. Um, so at night time, it can actually feel like I've just finished an emotional marathon. I guess I talk about that a
Uh,
lot. So
Absolutely, but I think for even most people without a mental health issue, if you've been working all day or you've been flat out all day, by the time you get to the evening, you're going to be tired and you're not going to want to wrestle with the big questions of life at the end of the day. You
yeah,
just want to relax in the recliner and go to bed. Probably.
probably, and particularly because our kids aren't babies anymore.
No, they're not. They're not. They're big babies.
Okay, so we're talking about perception. And one of the big things that you've mentioned recently that I wanted to ask you about was the fact that my perception of things, my remembrance of certain circumstances, conversations, can often be, if not skewed, can be completely wrong. My
Yes.
perception of things.
And sometimes there's been circumstances where you've forgotten the whole conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, that can be frustrating when you've forgotten a whole conversation and it was important.
Like I forgot that it just happened at all.
That's right. In your mind, you've said to me, we never had that conversation. And I've said to you, seriously, we were sitting out in the car. It was outside, out on the front of our house, and we sat in the car and kept talking. And you don't remember that, and you go, no,
Okay.
that's happened a few times. Not conversations in the car so much, just generally conversations where you've forgotten what we've talked about.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know.
Yeah.
You would have to tell me why you forget things. Now, I don't know whether it's what do they say? It's the male thing where the woman's going, what, so you don't remember it, or
Yeah, but you don't, that's not how we communicate, though.
it's not. But I'm quite sure that if I was banging on about something that really wasn't that important, or you felt that that was important, I wouldn't blame you for probably wiping it.
Yeah, but no, I mean, I my goal is to be engaged and to be a
Yes,
support and
of
be
course.
part of the team. So I'm not intentionally forgetting things. Now, the other thing about that is that, um, and we used to find this when you were in my psychologist sessions, we would come out of a psychologist session and there would be an issue or a concern or a thought that came out, and I would explain to you how I saw it, and you're sitting there looking at me like, who could ever have come to that assumption? That's not what we were talking about. That was not the intent. So there's a perception on my part as a person with mental illness that can distort my immediate memory of even conversations.
Your memory, and also the important takeaway there is how you perceive how someone's saying something to you
Yeah.
can also be distorted.
Okay. And that can be quite an issue as well, can't it?
I think so, because often you can take on board something that someone said, but you'll be telling me that they've said it to you in an aggressive manner or
Yep.
in a rude manner.
Yep.
Um, that's offensive, whereas I was right there and that's not what happened and that's wouldn't have been the intent.
Right.
So it's then about explaining to you, actually, that's not what happened at all. Now, that can be difficult if, let's say, you were very upset about it.
Yeah.
So I can still give you my point of view, my opinion, but then I'd need to step back and let you have a moment. Because I can guarantee you, if I let you have a moment, you get some perspective, feel calmer about what we've talked about, you will think about it and then come back to me later and say that you agree.
And this is an important point. And I was actually asked this question the other day, and I tried to answer it as best I could. Um, this perception that you're angry, and the from looking at me, seeing my grumpy face, um, and thinking that the way I responded is quite angry. And I forgot what the question was that the person asked, but it was really pertinent and it was really important and impactful.
Yes.
So if you could just
You've just
nod,
given
like I
an
said, something.
example of forgetting.
Yeah, no, it's completely gone.
It's just happened. It's just happened.
Oh man, I'm hopeless. Now, that's the thing about me as well. I wasn't generally a forgetful person
No,
before I got hurt.
I wouldn't say that. It's a long time ago, though. It's a long time ago.
It is a long time ago.
Yeah.
It is a long time. But it does amaze me how often that my perception is completely wrong. Um, and I've learned to, in the moment, like while I'm in a moment, and I might feel my heart rate increasing, I'm able to step back a little bit sometimes, not all the
Mm.
times, and just go, hang on a sec. You need to stop that. You're starting to panic. I actually had that at the school today. I was at a school talking to kids about bullying and mental illness, and one of the um, at one point the class got really disruptive, and I could feel my heart rate pumping. I could feel my temperature rising. I was starting to feel cranky. I was like starting to get mad at these kids, even though they were private school kids, absolutely beaten into submission by their teachers.
Mm.
Um, And I did. I had to stop. I had to take a deep breath. I had to be mindful of where I was. I had to be mindful that I was safe and that I was in control of the situation, that I could leave if I really needed to, which is a big thing. That not feeling trapped in a situation. Um, and even before a couple of weeks ago, I wouldn't have been proud of that. I wouldn't even thought to tell that as a story because it just was like it happens so often. Something happens and I'm, okay, calm down, think, is it what's going on?
Mm.
Okay, so perceptions. The misconception can come from the person outside of the mental illness as well. We can assume that the person with mental illness is thinking one thing, and their mouth might even be saying something, but their mind is telling them something completely different.
Well, of course, because we're not a bunch of mind readers either. Um, you're not going to know all the time how someone is. And I think that's where developing a way to communicate and a way to talk about it without having to dig it through
Yeah.
where the conversation needs to go on is important, and having a language shorthand is what I would call it.
This is another question I answered the other day, and I won't forget it. Um, Somebody asked that. They said, I've got somebody that I care for, but when they're in bad mental health stage, I can't get through to them. We can't communicate. And I indicated to them that that was the problem. You're trying to communicate at the wrong time. Would you agree? Like when
Mm.
somebody's in the middle of a mental health crisis is not the time to sit down and say, let's work on our communication.
It's true, but it can also be hard because life doesn't stop because you're having a mental health crisis. And that can be really difficult for the person on the other end who's caring for you or who's part of your family, because they may really need you, but you're not accessible.
Yeah. But what I'm talking about is not trying to build those communication strategies while somebody's in the middle of a
Oh,
crisis.
of course. Yeah, you wait
So
until you're in a good frame of mind and a good perspective to be able to do it and to be able to hear the other person's point of view, but also putting in those strategies that work for both.
yeah. Well, I mean, we had that thing early in our marriage where we would say, I need to tell you something, but you can't get upset. Because it wasn't an attack and it wasn't me coming out of the gate, you've done something wrong and I hate you. It was like, mate, you're doing something in our relationship which hurts me or I don't feel comfortable with. Can we talk about it? But we always had to do that in a safe space and at an agreed time.
Yeah. I mean, the other person is always still going to be thinking, oh, geez, what is it?
Well, you do, but when you take that emotion off the table, when you assure somebody that, hey, I'm not, this is not an attack.
Hmm.
I don't hate you. I'm just concerned about something. Can we talk about it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. But I think more importantly, with having someone in your life with mental health issues, you have to form an even more basic way
Well,
of
yeah,
talking about things,
yeah.
because you can't get into a big conversation about it because it might actually make them feel more anxious, more angry, or a lot of different emotions.
Well, that's right. Even the conversation can be a trigger for people.
Well,
But
that's exactly right.
but if you and we'll use our youngest daughter because I is the best example I can think of. We had to really tailor the way that we communicate with her into very much a shorthand because for her, even in her good days, she's not verbose.
Mm.
She doesn't like to talk about stuff.
And when we're talking about shorthand, we're just talking about sometimes a thumbs up.
No,
And that has to be okay.
Yeah, and your shorthand with me, the one that comes readily to mind was, "Are you doing okay?" or "Are you mad?"
Which
Just
is
very, very
actually,
short
well,
questions.
exactly, which is something that is echoed from a lot of different mental health organizations as well. Are you okay? And
Yeah.
then you have to trust what they're saying to you is where they're at.
Well, because when I was first hurt and we had our kids, you would call me 4 or 5 times a day just to check in and make sure everything was okay. Out of genuine concern, not for the kids' safety, but for my mental health. It was, are you coping okay? Are things all right? Is it getting on top of you? And what we've now grown to and what we both understand is that every morning when I wake up, because I always wake up later than you, you're going to check in with me. And I have to check in with you. And that's kind of a shorthand. And it's not, okay, I want to explain my feelings to you today. It's just, how you doing? You're up? Are you able to function? You're listening to my tone, and you're making your own mind up that, okay, I don't have to worry about him today. Okay.
Exactly. I do think when we're talking about perception, though, people need to be aware, and the person with the mental health issue needs to be aware that at times that person will come across to you as rude, mean, dismissive, as if they don't care about you. None of that's true, and you have to hang in there, and you need to start the shorthand conversation to help you to get through those moments.
How were you ever able to communicate that to me in a way that you felt I really took to heart?
Definitely not in the early stages. No, not at all.
Well, in the
I
early
think,
stages, I was just struggling to keep my head above water.
yeah,
So.
and from my perspective, I was just struggling to understand what was going on and how to even navigate it.
Well, one of your favourite expressions is the knowledge is power.
It is.
I like to say that you can't fix a problem if you don't know what the problem is.
Yeah. But I think if someone's going to approach a person who they know with mental health issues to talk to them about these things, you would have to pick your moment. You couldn't just come at them at any time telling them all these things that they're doing wrong.
Yeah. Well, I know that the conversation with our shorthand was not a one-off conversation. It wasn't, okay, we're going to sit down. You're going to give me an okay symbol. If you're a little bit angry, you're going to give me thumbs up. You're going to give. It wasn't like that. It was, we need to build a shorthand. I want you to start thinking about that. And then you walked away. And then you came back a week later and said, have you had any thoughts about the shorthand thing? And of course I had by that time. But what you were doing there is you were de-escalating my symptoms by not trying to confront me while I was in the moment. Because I've already got my head screaming at me, telling me that I suck. Then when the person that I love most in the world, the person that unfortunately is my carer, seems to criticize, it compounds. And you're not criticizing, and you may be frustrated with the situation, but generally you're not frustrated with me as a person. It's like, I hate the way that he's behaving. I hate what I'm seeing. I still love him.
Of course.
And that's an important thing for people with mental illness to understand, is that our moments may just last. We can feel something very strongly in a moment, and then 5 minutes later we're feeling strongly about something else. So I feel love for my kids, and then one of them drops peanut butter on my lap or something, I don't feel love for them anymore. I can't distinguish between those two things, the fact that I still love them and the fact that I'm just angry at what they've done. But I've had to learn that other people aren't like that. You aren't like that. So when you say you love me in the morning, you still love me in the afternoon, no matter what my head says.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
And I think that's really, really important to understand, is just how, at times, just how mean someone can be and they don't mean it, and the things you can say back to them. I do think that you need to be really, really careful in how you talk to each other, but also the person who's suffering needs to understand and get more aware of themselves
and their
impact on people. But there's going to be a lot of people who are in situations where family members and loved ones and friends just don't care. They don't care enough to help them to see what their behavior's like, and then they're equally mean and rude back to them.
Yeah. So the person without a mental illness isn't able to step back and take the emotion out of the thing and say, okay, what is this person really trying to say? Trusting that, okay, person now is presenting with significant mental health issues. They're still the same person.
I think so. They are the same person. They just have these moments where they're struggling inside themselves, and at times where they are the worst version of themselves and they're mean. Yeah. It's all the absolute worst parts of yourself that you know, and that's what you present to other people.
I'm not as bad as I was with
no,
it.
No, of course not. No,
Yeah,
not at all.
Well, what's changed in that space? Do you think I've had to work at it? Do you think
I think you've had to work very hard at it.
No.
Is what I think. No. Yeah. You're talking about such a vast difference where you are angry all the time. I wouldn't say that you feel angry all the time now.
Yeah.
Do you feel angry all the time?
No.
Yeah.
But when I start to panic, when I start to feel out of control, my first response is always anger. Yes. So at school today, I wanted to lash out at the boys that were being noisy and boisterous. That was my first impulse. Just stand up and tell them all to shut the hell up. It's like I don't have that switch that says that runaway switch. Like another educator at the thing today had to leave. Okay. Turns out they were unwell. But the one thing that we thought was we had to make sure that nothing had triggered them. Because we want our educators in MEAC to be safe when they're presenting at a school. And that's our first assumption, that something's happened and they run. And I don't really seem to have that running.
But that's not part of. But that's not part of your personality.
Yeah, so, I guess so.
Just because you have mental health issues doesn't mean that you completely lose yourself. Sometimes, some days you can, for sure, but
lose myself in anger, or
as in lose the person who you are.
Oh, okay.
At your essence, who are you as a person?
Yeah.
You that person's still there. They still exist. It's just when you're going through situations when your mental health is at its worst, I think it's harder to be your true self.
Yeah. Well, I've been falling back on this tsunami analogy lately. Like, we see ourselves as a pristine beach in Indonesia, in Bali, with palm trees, or Hawaii, beautiful white sand. But when a tsunami comes, it brings up all the rubbish from the bottom of the ocean, and a tsunami is not a clean phenomenon. The water is not like what comes out your tap. A tsunami is ugly and it's terrible and it's destructive. So all those things that you built up in your life, that you're starting to see your beach, your life, your personality as being pristine again. It's looking nice. But this tsunami of emotion comes. And if you don't have the patience to ride out the tsunami, you start to think that when the tsunami's at its peak, that this is my new normal. This is what the rest of my life is going to be like. Everything that I love about myself, everything that I've put in place is broken and destroyed, and it's never going to get any better. Not understanding that with every tsunami, it will recede. It will go back. The places in Aceh, in Indonesia, that were just written off by the tsunami in 2004 or 6 are now pristine and beautiful again. And people have had to put work in, obviously. They can't just, if a house gets knocked down, you've got to rebuild it. But when you're using that metaphor to talk about your mental illness and this idea that when things do recede, you've got to remember to put your systems in place so that you can rebuild. And
exactly.
you can rebuild more quickly than before.
Exactly. I do want to point out that I like that you put an actual geographic location into your example. Most people would just say a crystal clear beach. They wouldn't say it's in Indonesia, but I like that. It's very specific.
What's mental illness if you can't be a little bit anal? I tell you what, I got a note from my doctor that says I'm crazy. So
no. Look, I love it. I was just sitting here, and you went crystal clear beach. I thought I'm there, and then you went in Indonesia. I thought, okay, I haven't been there, but I'm gonna stick with it.
That's why I threw in Hawaii, because I know you've been to Hawaii.
Anyway,
the metaphor still stands.
Whether you're on a crystal clear beach in your own country or another country, I think that's fine. I think what's important is with the people who you love and care about in your world who have mental health issues, just start having your conversations and your dialogue when they're in a good space. And they could be rare. It could be hard to find them. Be patient. And as soon as it opens up where they seem to be a little more receptive, just approach them in a non-confrontational way.
Yeah.
And just say, hey.
You're walking up to them and go, your behaviour sucks and we've got to fix it.
It's unacceptable.
No, you're not mental. Let's talk about it.
So that's definitely an example of how not to approach you. I would, if it was you and I would approach you and I would say, I was having a thought that when you're not doing well, it would be good if I could ask you this and then you let me know yes or no. That's how I would approach that conversation.
Yeah.
Because I'm not coming at you saying your last mental health episode was really terrible and it was super hard and I hate it every time you do this. That's not going to get anywhere.
Yeah. Well, you're going to close up because that's an attack.
That's right. So it's just better off keeping it open.
Yeah, and your mind's already telling you all those things. As a person with mental illness, your mind is already saying you suck. To have it confirmed on the outside is like a red flag to a bull.
Yeah, and I
in
wouldn't.
Pamplona, in Spain.
Oh gosh. And I wouldn't even say to someone if they do have a mental health condition, so we need to talk.
Oh yeah, no, that's not a good one.
Or like it was okay early on in our marriage, but I wouldn't now come up to you and say, now don't get upset when I say this to you.
Yeah.
That's not. Yeah, I wouldn't go there either.
Because I'm going to be upset.
Yeah.
Because I see myself in the worst possible light.
Well, that's right. And that's why I think it's better if you just go up to the person, perhaps smile and just say, I was thinking this is a good idea.
What do you think?
They could shoot you down, but you're doing the best you can. And if it didn't work in that moment, pick another moment.
It's important to note that one part of my personality, even before I got hurt, was if somebody mentioned something to me that I needed to change, something about myself, something that I was passionate about, and they were implying that there needed a change, I would always arc up in the moment. I'd jump to my own defense.
Yeah.
But then I'd go away and think about it and could come back and can have completely changed my mind.
Yeah.
So I like the idea of, you mentioned before, picking your moments. I like the idea of making an appointment. Tell me when you're in a good headspace, if you can't already tell, because sometimes for me, bad headspace, good headspace feels exactly the same.
And tired headspace.
Tired headspace, cranky
Is the
headspace.
same.
It's all the same. There's no change in there, even though there is. I like the idea of making an appointment. So, and not writing it down in a book or anything, but just saying, look, when you're in a bit of a better headspace, I just want to talk to you about how I can ask you things in a way that doesn't upset you.
Yeah. So you wouldn't go up to the person and say, I want to make an appointment with you. that would be dorky and weird.
I'll get my people to get in touch with your people.
That would be weird.
I'll get my youngest son to talk to your youngest daughter and make a time to schedule. But for the person with mental illness, if they've got that, if they understand that they've got the space to mull over something and be wrong with something, but they're able to do it privately by themselves. Because that was a lot of it, that criticism, that self-stigma, that thing that I was terrible and that I sucked. And anybody that said anything remotely negative that I perceived was the God's honest truth, and it agreed with every thought that I already had in my head.
Exactly.
No. All right, so perception, it is a powerful thing, and I think, I don't know if you'd agree with me with this. I think perception breaks up a lot of relationships. People forget, like we've talked about often. You see these people on their wedding day, I will love and cherish you forever. And then 5 or 6 years later, they're divorced. It's like, well, did you forget that you said that? Or do you... And often it comes down to perception. They now hate me. They now have changed how they feel about me. Have they really? Or are you just not communicating properly?
And that's true. Legitimately, sometimes you can feel differently.
Yeah.
Particularly where you're feeling resentful, which happens. It happens when you're in a relationship with someone who has mental health issues. You can feel very resentful.
Yeah.
Because for years on end, you can just be with a person who is, as we were saying, is that mean person all the time. Now that would be hard for anyone to live with. Of course, the person with the mental health issue, they can't stand themselves. And then the person who's living with them has to also live in this situation where everything they do is wrong. And there's no right, there's no win for anyone.
Yeah.
Now that's hard. That's a hard place to be in. And the perception of that can sometimes be very, very real.
Yeah. Well, and it's hard to hear that. It's hard to talk about this stuff dispassionately without realizing that I'm talking about myself and how I let myself down, how my behaviors were not what I would have expected of myself.
But the progress and the process of fixing perceptions can take time, and it does take a level of patience
and effort
on both parties,
yeah.
On your part and mine.
Alrighty, well, we want to thank everybody for listening.
Thank you for listening to Shattered the podcast. I'd like to thank our producer Meredith Brosnan, our executive producer Torian Lau, and the band Adelaide for allowing us to use their song as our theme. Go to shatteredthepodcast.com for more information.
Thanks, everyone. Subscribe, like, and share.